Welcome to another episode of the Battlefields and Bourbon Podcast, the podcast where we sit and sip, talk all things Civil War history and bourbon and whiskey. I'm Jack, joined as always by my co-host Elijah. Today we're coming to you from the historic Bell House in beautiful downtown Winchester, Virginia. The Bell House is preserved and maintained by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, the managing body of the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District, and the official sponsor of the Battlefields and Bourbon Podcast. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast, consider becoming a member of the Battlefields Foundation. Every dollar you give to support battlefield preservation here in the Shenandoah Valley, in turn, helps support the Battlefields and Bourbon Podcast. You can head over to www.shenandoahatwar.org. That's www.shenandoahatwar.org. Click on Ways to Give and click on Membership. They start as low as $35 and go till you can't give no more. So go out, head over, and become a member. Elijah.
Jack.
Back in the saddle.
Third time.
Third
hiatus.
Oh, hey, no, every good band has a hiatus.
They get longer and longer, too.
Yeah. Do they?
It feels like they have. This one's been 2 months. Yeah, this was 2 months.
In the room with us, we've got returning guest, resident Yankee Jim Goecker here as our main guest for today's episode. We also have Steve Chesley. Steve, if you don't remember, if you didn't listen to our last episode, Steve was our guest talking about Mulligan in the Second Battle of Kernstown, and we felt obligated to bring Steve back on because if he's the reason we had this hiatus this time, then we have to make sure he's here when we start back up. So, but the podcast must have done something well because days after its release, Steve is talking at a National Civil War conference in Winchester in front of hundreds of people about the same story he told all of us about. So those are the folks in the room with us. We're excited to be back here. Our apologies. We have been busy. Elijah's trying to become a fireman.
Yeah.
And
that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, and I'm saving battlefields. The schedules don't always align. Today was a day where everything just seemed to have worked out. And we wanted to get you all another episode as soon as possible. So we've got Jim, we've got Steve, Elijah here. Let's get our glasses full. Elijah, tell everybody what we're sipping on today.
Going to break out a good one today. We've got the Weller 107 from Buffalo Trace. This is, as the name would suggest, a 107 proof bourbon. So it's 53.5% alcohol by volume. And if you're familiar with Weller or anything from, Buffalo Trace like that, this is their wheated mash bill. So this is, instead of, having rye in the mash bill, there's just wheat with that corn and malted barley. But
good pop.
Yeah, Weller always has a good pop. That's a good bottle.
That was good.
But
am I going crazy that some Weller is screw top?
Yeah, no, there are a couple that are screw top. The green label, the Special Reserve, the 12-year, the black label. I think that's it. But yeah, there's a variety of different ones. They've got foolproof, CYPB, which is like create your perfect bourbon or something along those lines. The 107 here, Special Reserve, like I said. And then there's an antique lineup, foolproof, single barrel. There's a lot of the Weller lineup, but one of my favorites. I love Weller, and like each expression that I've had has been really, really good.
Yeah, this made its way to the local liquor stores here in Winchester just before Christmas. So
A rare occurrence
here, and I think this was a Christmas gift, but good smell.
Yeah, it's always good. It's got like a cinnamon, but also very sweet for being, a wheated bourbon. It's just got a little bit of warmth to it at 107. It's not overpowering, but enough to give you a little bit of everything.
Got you a little bit of the quintessential caramel.
Yeah, Jim, I know you like this stuff too.
I do. Antique 107 is pretty good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve over here took his first sip straight, nothing in it. What are your thoughts, Steve?
It feels really good going down.
Seemed to have ginger ale in it.
It's got a little heat in it. No ginger ale
Not yet.
But no, really, really good. I like it.
I'll be interested to hear the review once you add the ginger ale. If you don't remember last time, if you didn't listen to the last episode, Steve partook in our bourbon and then added his own ginger ale, and I'm sure made a really good mixed drink. I love mixing stuff.
Well, and then I spilled it all over the table.
You did. So you're going to be extra careful today. We told you can only use one hand for this episode. The other one has to just stay on your lap. So you can't use
No
it.
waving around or anything, huh?
Yeah, I didn't know this was such a high-ticket item until I think you had texted me that it was in a store or something. Or I saw it. I think I was eating at like Texas Roadhouse, which is in Winchester, right next to probably one of the largest, if not one of the largest bourbon.
One of the busier ABCs.
And isn't the bourbon section pretty large for an ABC or no?
Oh yeah, no, they've got one of the biggest sections, I think, in the area.
So I was eating my steak, and I think Elijah had like called me or texted me and was like, they have Weller Antique 107, and I was like counting the people at my table. I was like, okay, how many people are 21? And I was like, so if we all just buy one, that'll math. And I think they only had like 2 bottles left by the time I got there. So.
Yeah, they go quick.
They go quick, but it's
good reason.
Yeah,
that's good stuff. I love it. It's one of my favorite Buffalo Trace expressions, like I said. But they don't give you much to go off of. No age statement, no mash bill. You just know there's weed in it. But
Weller does pretty well with that formula too, by the way, right?
Yeah.
No age statement or anything. They kind of get away with it.
Well,
absolutely.
People will die by Weller. I mean, they love it. Absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Everyone's got something good to sip on. Steve, anything else?
I think I'll just keep drinking this straight.
What?
Wow.
How about that?
I'll wait till it's done.
Wow.
How about that?
I'm going to have to call Steve an Uber.
I'm slowly becoming a man.
Hey,
Well,
drink it any way you like. Drink it any way you want.
Hey, and I bet it's extra good, too, because Steve just got a puppy. So, yeah. So
What a nightmare.
Steve's
Don't ever get a beagle puppy.
Oh, you don't sleep anymore, do you?
No.
Yeah, I figured.
a lot of barking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Steve's like, this bourbon tastes extra good today.
I mean,
Thanks
stay
for
a while.
inviting me so I don't have to go home to that.
That's right. That's
Damn dog.
may be here a while.
That's what I thought when I called Steve. I was like, we're going to have Steve. I was like, Steve probably needs a little break.
Yeah.
It was like, you posted a picture holding the dog, and I was like, normally you'd be joking, but your face
No,
just
his
looked
face was
like,
not.
like mad dad face. It's just like,
Stuck with it.
Yeah, so we're all drinking it straight. This is great. Well, if you don't have your glasses full at home or you're listening in the morning, take a sip of your coffee, whatever you need to do. But we're going to dive into a great story of the war that doesn't get a lot of attention. We mentioned it briefly in a previous episode.
Right,
Jim let us know that we did. We had forgotten it had been a while, obviously. And that's Kilpatrick's raid. And Jim has a bunch of topics kind of on the burner, always waiting for us. And when this episode came up, he was like, do you want to do this? And I was like, yes, what time? So we're going to talk about Kilpatrick's raid today. But Jim, is there anything else you wanted to add to this to kind of set the scene or just dive right into it?
Dive right into it.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, 1864, if you're looking at it in the Eastern Theater, especially Army of Potomac, Army of Northern Virginia, 64 for the cavalry becomes the year of the raid. There are 3 Union raids either towards Richmond or around Petersburg during that summer. Only one of which was very successful, and that was when Sheridan, it would have been the middle raid, when they ended up at Yellow Tavern. Of course, Jeb Stuart is mortally wounded there. But that's as close to a success that they had in the 3. Kilpatrick's raid is the first one. Kilpatrick, Judson Kilpatrick was kind of an interesting fellow. He graduated with Custer, so they were contemporaries, and he was one of the young warriors promoted to general in June of '63 over hundreds of other officers to bring some dash, some daring, some audacity to the cavalry corps of the Army of the Potomac. He served, again, as a brigade commander, division commander. He was the one who, on July 3rd, '63, ordered the cavalry attack on the far east flank of the Confederate line after Pickett's charge. It was a disaster. It was a poor decision on his part, and ended up costing the life of another young officer who had been promoted at the same time as Kilpatrick and Custer, and that was Elon Farnsworth. So he had a real reputation in the Army as, again, very aggressive, but a little vainglorious. His nickname was Kill Cavalry because of the way he would run horses, as well as seemingly a little careless with committing troops to battle. So he a mixed bag on him as we move forward. The thing that we have to know about him as an individual, though, is that while he was fairly successful as a commander despite all of this, when we get to 64, roughly around Christmas, 63, back up, he got married right out of the academy. War was here. It was one of those now or never. So he gets married. He has a child. And within 2 weeks of the first of the year of 1864, both his wife and his child die.
Oh, man. How?
Wow.
Disease.
Okay.
I don't recall exactly, typhoid or something. But pretty traumatic for him. He's 25, 26 years old. He did not drink, which was unusual for the period. So we're drinking it. If we'd have been doing this right, be drinking lemonade or something, but I'm glad we didn't. But he was a teetotaler, and he didn't smoke. But boy, he liked women. That was the thing, particularly after his wife died. They kind of said he kind of lost it. But throughout the rest of the war, there were rumors, and more than rumors, about the number of women that would be around the headquarters and about his appetite for women and what have you. But he was also... one guy described him as a frothy braggart, meaning, a lot of talk, not a lot behind it. But he never lacked self-confidence. So when we get into February of 64, of course, everything's still tied up. They're along the Rapidan. It's not quite campaign season yet. But he's looking for a way to gain attention. By getting involved in some of the politics, the Army, as well as civilian politics, he had made some enemies. And he needed a way to kind of show who he was and also to regain some of the popularity that he thought he deserved. So he cooked up a plan. And he thought it was an extraordinary plan, as only Kilpatrick could imagine. And he decides it was such a good plan that he could not take it to his commanding officer. He couldn't entrust it to him. He needed to take it to the president. So Brigadier General Kilpatrick, Judson Kilpatrick, he had a lot of political friends, senators, congressmen, what have you. And he gets word to Washington that he had a great plan that was so good that he needed to present it to the president. And before long, he gets a call, or not a call, obviously, but a telegram message to come to Washington. And there he presents his plan to Lincoln and to Stanton and to everyone else. His plan was to take a mounted force of 5,000 men in a battery and, by deception, slip out of the Union lines and head for Richmond and take Richmond long enough to empty out Belle Isle and Libby Prison. That was the focus of his entire process here. So his plan was this raid would go into Richmond, and then they would either return back the way they came, or they could slide off to the east and join Ben Butler's army of the James and get in lines there. So that was the plan. And beyond that, there wasn't much of a plan. But he was an orator. He was a good talker. And Lincoln and everybody everyone was well aware of what was happening in Libby and what was happening at Belle Isle and how terrible the conditions were, and were concerned about it. They kind of said, this is crazy and kind of audacious, but it might work. So they gave their blessing to him. So he goes back to the Army. General George Meade, who's of course the Army commander, he didn't go over just Pleasanton, the Cavalry Corps commander, but he went over the Army's commander. He had also insulted George Meade's son for some reason. So Kilpatrick was not well thought of.
He's on a roll.
He's on a roll. He's on a roll. But the funny thing was that when Meade, he was angry about all the above, but when the order came from Washington, to support this endeavor, he actually did say, well, I'm going to have to do it. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. We'll try. So he throws his support behind. So it's mid-February at this point. The order goes out to collect about 4,000. It turns out not 5,000, but 4,000 cavalrymen from the Cavalry Corps of the Army of the Potomac, which had 3 divisions. here's where things started getting a little messy. The orders would go out to a regiment. There was one regiment where they were ordered to send 50 men from Company F, but the captain from Company C was put in charge of them. Didn't make a lot of sense. They would want 25 from this regiment, 23 from that one. It was trying to select the best men, but done in a very piecemeal way. So ultimately, you had this polyglot unit of 4,000 men who didn't know each other, didn't know their commanders. Some of them were serving with other men that they'd never seen before as this thing is gathering on the Rapidan. While that activity is going on, there was another young man named Ulrich Dahlgren. And anybody know Dahlgren? Anybody ring a bell?
I feel like I've heard Ulrich before.
Yeah.
We're not Navy guys. Dad was admiral in the Union Army, or Navy, excuse me. I just said Army again. In the Navy. Ulrich was his 21-year-old son who had gained quite a bit of notoriety along the way. He had actually served in the Valley. He was on the staff of Franz Siegel in *62 and served with him until a point when he was promoted to lieutenant colonel. He's promoted lieutenant colonel, and he's then placed on the staff of Joseph Hooker. Right before Gettysburg, or actually during the Battle of Gettysburg, he has convinced Meade at that point to give him a small body of scouts and cavalrymen, and he wanted to roam around south of Gettysburg to see what he could find. And on July the 2nd, he captures a messenger from Jeff Davis to Robert E. Lee, and in plain, not code, but in plain writing, the message basically says, hey, we're strapped. I can't send you anybody. I can't even send you supplies. You're on your own. That's pretty remarkable information sent just out in the open, and he was able to capture that. So that got him a lot of notoriety. 3 days later, he's in Frederick, Maryland, and in a little spat, and again, the Confederate forces are leaving Gettysburg by a lot of different directions, and in Frederick, he's shot in the foot, and eventually the leg is amputated from the knee down. And it becomes a real touch and go for him, whether he was going to live or not. Within that view, they promote him to colonel, thinking he's maybe going to die, and, this is for capturing the messages and everything else. Well, he rallies, and now he's got a crutch. He's out on his horse. He's learning how to ride again. He actually went to sea with his father for a while, getting himself back into fighting shape and learning how to manipulate life with, one leg. He hears about Kilpatrick's raid. He says, I've got to be a part of that. This sounds like something too good to miss. So he goes and convinces Kilpatrick to bring him along, and he becomes an integral part of the raid. Because as this evolves, this ends up a huge controversy at the end of the raid, and I'll explain here in just a little bit. But Dahlgren is given a force of 500 men. He's to do an alternative path, and Kilpatrick would attack from the north. Dahlgren is supposed to go all the way around to the south side and attack from the south, so that there's always this distraction, this confusion. Also, as part of the plan, and as they left on February 28th, was a raid by Custer out to Charlottesville, which I believe we covered. You guys covered a few episodes back.
Rio Hill.
Rio Hill, where nobody shot at each other. Nobody. It was a pseudo battle.
Stick guns and fun stuff like that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Jared Marlowe came on that episode. Yep.
Well, that occurred as a distraction for the raid.
Okay.
So as Custer's cutting across country to the west, a couple other infantry regiments go a different direction. They're trying to draw attention away from the fact that Kilpatrick and his force is crossing the Rapidan and headed south, and it works very well.
So Custer and his men, they're aware of the raid that's going on, and they're purposely doing a distraction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%. They were sent on that raid specifically to draw attention, to draw all the attention west, when really this raid's going to go southeast and then directly down on to Richmond. So they cross the Rapidan on the 28th.
It's widening the gap.
It's widening the gap. Yeah. It's drawing attention again, focused. Lee's going, okay, it's not quite, well, it's early for campaign season. It's the end of February, early March. What's going on? He can't ignore it. So his attention is drawn that way. The Confederate forces, some are shifted. Some of the cavalry are shifted further west in case this is a bigger thing than they're seeing. And that gives Kilpatrick's force a chance to slip across. It's spectacularly successful at this point. For the next 24 hours, nobody knows where he is. He's moving south very rapidly. They get to my source here. They get to Mount Pleasant. Sorry, I had to double check. And Dahlgren is sent out on his mission. He and 500 men would go south to the James River, cross it, and come around on the south side and come into Richmond on the south side. So that if you're in Richmond trying to defend it, you're hearing of troops going around, coming from the south, from the north. You are distracted. This is a deception kind of campaign, this whole lead up. So they get down, and remember Kilpatrick, very self-assured, kind of the braggart. He was convinced he could be, who knows, maybe elected president if this pulls off. I mean, he was thinking of a political career after the war. So as they move south, they're burning some stations, tearing up track, kind of the typical thing, and they get to the north edge of Richmond. By now, the alarm is out. You know, stations are burning. The word's out. But the problem was, Richmond is pretty much stripped bare. You know, throughout the war, Richmond was building defenses to protect the capital. There weren't any men to staff it, to man the defenses. So they actually get into 2 or 3 lines of the defensive lines of Richmond. And just when you would think Mr. Audacious and, you know, he would charge in and be the hero, he pauses.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, usually in battle that's fatal. And this
Too
is
good to be
also
true.
Little McClellan action out here.
Yeah. So in the meantime, he's driving the cavalry hard. They've taken 3 days of rations, only brought 1 day of forage for the horses, and he's driven them hard. The guys have already been in the saddle now almost 36 hours, virtually no rests. So when they get to the defenses, he decides to send skirmishers out against the next line because he could see a little bit of activity. Well, what he was seeing was about 600, what do they call them, a city force. They were home guard. They would have a battalion of factory workers. They would have a battalion of clerks from the War Department, that sort of thing, and they were very rudimentarily trained. There would have been boys, old men, very rudimentarily trained and equipped, but they were the last line of defense. And when the bell rang, they knew, which was their signal to gather, they knew something bad was happening. So they go running out to the battlements, and there's about 600 of them. Kilpatrick has 3,500 veteran cavalrymen of the Army of the North of Potomac. And all he had to do was go south, gentlemen, and let's go to Belle Isle. He pauses. He stops. And for 2 hours messes around. In the meantime, more men are coming out of the city. At the same time, the whistles went off. There were trains coming in, or at least he thought there were trains coming in with more troops. And he loses all of his confidence. He lost confidence in Judson Kilpatrick at that point. So we're going to pause for a second because remember we sent Dahlgren out with 500 men, and he's driving south by a little different direction, but he has gotten to the James River. Members of the Bureau of Military Information, which were the scouting unit for the Army of the Potomac, had found a guide to get them across the James. We also have to remember at the end of February, and now it's March 1, it's raining and beginning to sleet and snow. It's still that time of year, as we all know, in Virginia, it could be any kind of weather. The roads are getting bad. They've been pushing hard, too. The men are tired and hungry and cold. And then when they get the guide and they get to the crossing at the James River, it's chest high or higher. They cannot get their horses across. They cannot get themselves across. What they didn't realize, and the guy didn't realize, it had rained 2 days before out here in western Virginia, and the James was flooding because of that. It hadn't rained right where they were, but it rained further upstream, and now the river was well above normal rate. So Dahlgren is a little upset by that, so he hangs the guy. And
Okay.
Understandable, I guess.
put a sign on. Well, he kind of told him, he said, if you don't find me another way across, I'm going to hang you. And he said, I don't know of any other way. So unfortunately, that gentleman was sacrificed because of weather.
Because there's no smartphones and weather apps.
No smartphones. And the other thing, they were going to communicate. He and Kilpatrick, they didn't know where each other were, obviously. As you say, no cell phones, no way to communicate. They were going to communicate with rockets and different ways through the air, but it was overcast, it was rainy, they couldn't use them. So Kilpatrick has no idea where Dahlgren is. Dahlgren has no idea where Kilpatrick is. So they're just going to play it by ear at this point. So he's hearing firing north of Richmond. So he goes, okay, Kilpatrick must be there. So they change their plans. They turn totally east, follow the James River into, their idea was, again, to go into the fortifications, try and get through and what have you. Kilpatrick and me, ultimately he's trying to, Dahlgren's going to try and get to Kilpatrick because his plan is blown up. He can't come from the south. He's beginning to get resistance. So okay, I'll go and add, and Kilpatrick, we can still get this done. Doesn't happen. Dahlgren's force is beginning to be, it's a much smaller force. These home guards, they're further out in the county. They're beginning to gather. The sniping is beginning. They're being delayed. One of the commanders of the home guard did an ingenious thing. He had about 200 men gathered. He put 50 up. They fire one volley and come back. So they fire and run back. There'd be another line of 50. They one volley. So by this, he slowed the advance down to the point. And then Dahlgren tried to charge it. Well, unfortunately, when he charged, all 200 were there. Took a number of different casualties there. So he pulls back. And again, here we go again. Let's do it slow. Ultimately, Dahlgren's force gets separated at night. These guys are dog tired. It's raining. It's sleeting. The horses are slipping. The guys are sleeping on their horses. And there's breaks in the line because guys fell asleep or the horses stopped because they're exhausted too. And then they didn't know where the column went. So by the time he gets closer to Richmond, he has maybe 300 men with him out of the 500. They're almost out of ammunition too. This was not meant to be a knockdown, drag out, kind of mission.
Do you know what they were armed with?
There were some breech loaders. There were some Spencers.
I was going to say 64 would probably be.
Yeah, there were some. They were not all equipped, but they were beginning to be seen. Mm-hmm. And there were remarks by individuals who were on that march about our Spencers, did execution or what have you. So there were some, but I wouldn't certainly not say, like in the Valley, which virtually all the Union troops were in Spencers.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere out here.
Right. So the next thing becomes a controversy because Dahlgren is still trying to lead these troops out. He has, again, dark, got stopped again. He rides forward with a small party of 3 or 4 trying to find another way out. And long story short, he's killed in a firefight in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. What's found on him, however, is the controversy because when the Confederates came up, of course, they went through pockets trying to find any intelligence, that sort of thing. He had a wooden leg. That was odd. Someone took his wooden leg as a souvenir.
Is it still
Can't have
around
anything
today?
nice.
Huh? Is it around today?
I believe it is.
I bet it is.
Man.
I think it is.
Can't have anything.
But on his body was an unsigned order saying that when they got in Richmond, they were to kill Jeff Davis and his cabinet. And everybody's going, whoa. Unsigned, though. Not George Meade, not Wright Brand, whoever. Unsigned. So this is eventually brought to the attention of the Confederate government and becomes a huge deal. But we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves.
So nobody knows who wrote the order.
To this day, no one knows for sure.
Until right now. Jim, let everybody know. No, I'm just kidding.
It was ordered.
Have they tried to like match the handwriting to anybody, or
Well, the thing is, they're
Does that
not. Those
survive?
guys aren't writing those orders.
Yeah,
There's some
someone
guy,
clerk or something.
copying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me,
yeah.
it's like, hey, boy, write this down.
An adjutant comes in and fills it out. So while that's happening, Kilpatrick, like I say, lost his nerve. Wade Hampton has collected a small force of cavalry, about 300, and now they're beginning to get in the mix. So even though it's not a very big force, he's getting contact with real Confederate forces. So Kilpatrick said, "Okay, we're packing in. We're going east, and we're going to go over to Ben Butler, save ourselves there." They ride all night, and again, the same kind of things with his force. They're just beat to a pulp. Finally, at about 10 and 11 o'clock, they think they put enough distance that they can now make a camp, get at least a short rest. So they camp. Kilpatrick was never good about putting out sentries, or very many. They put out a minimal number of sentries. Everyone's passed out. There are a number of remarks by the men. They said, "We were dead to the world. We did not." And they had sleep for about 48 hours at that point, plus the ride, plus the cold, plus the lack of food. They were just spent. Hampton figures this out. He said, "Okay, his men are a little fresher. They haven't been marching from the Rapidan." He sends them around and captures a sentinel, so that they sneak into the camp. Make a long story short, these sleep-drugged Yankee soldiers laying on the ground has about 600 guys charging, screaming, shooting, and pounding their horses through their camps. And there were several of them who would write about this. It took me probably 2 or 3 minutes to even figure out what was going on. They were so exhausted that they lost comprehension as to what was happening.
Wow.
Kilpatrick loses. Well, then, Hampton realized, okay, 6 against 3,500. Yeah, that's not going to last too long. We need to leave. So they pound through the camps, scare the bejesus out of everybody, kill a few, wound a few, and Kilpatrick's done. He said, "Everybody on your foot, let's go. Leave the wagons, dump whatever, we're leaving. We got to get out of here." So they march through the night and the next day to get to Ben Butler's army. In the meantime, right before all of this, a remnant from Dahlgren catches up. In their attack, they say, "Well, we got to follow," and they stumble around, and lo and behold, they're able to catch up to the tail of Kilpatrick's column. And they straggle in to Ben Johnson's lines on March the 2nd. Meantime, that note has gone up the chain of command to Jeff Davis, to the cabinet, and they are incensed. This is not something you did in warfare in 1864, no matter how vicious it was. You don't try and take out the civilian leadership.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, Dahlgren's body had been buried along the side of the road, and Elizabeth Van Lew, famous crazy bet, who was actually a Union spy in Richmond, went out and got his body and reburied it. So when they realized, hey, that was somebody kind of important, or the son of somebody important, when they went out to get the body, he was gone. They didn't know what happened to his body. So the Confederates were denied the opportunity to barter to get the body, trade us, kind of like a prison exchange. This becomes an international affair with this note. The Union leadership, Lincoln and everybody, were forced to basically say, "Nope, I don't know where that came from, but it didn't come from any of us. That's not what we do and how we do it." It's one of those rare situations where the government basically apologized. "We don't know, but sorry, we didn't do it."
What an odd occurrence.
On an odd occurrence, yeah. But this has scared Richmond to death, because when you think about that, there were no troops there. Had he attacked or just charged straight ahead when he got there, he would have been in the Belle Isle. He would have been he could have gone out the east side and get those prisoners out. Now, here's the part of the plan that doesn't make a lot of sense. Those men were not in good shape, health-wise. When you're in prison, we all have read stories about the prison camps in the Civil War, about how poorly they were treated, how poorly they ate, their nutrition, what have you. And now you're going to march thousands of unarmed. They didn't make any provisions to bring arms to arm them. They're going to march them through the cold and the rain and everything else to Union lines, which are what? 25, 30 miles away. In all likelihood, had he been successful getting to Belle Isle, he would have been able to bring home relatively few of the men they would have released. So later, after the war, Crazy Bet showed them where his body was, and they were able to rebury him. He was taken north. His father, of course, was very upset. If you go to, well, it was not soon thereafter. He's buried in Arlington.
Where was he buried in Richmond? I guess it wouldn't be Richmond. But.
It was a hidden spot. Okay. I think it was on her brother's farm or something. But they were able to get the body out. Kilpatrick, of course, Dahlgren dies. Kilpatrick is disgraced by this. His dreams of glory, he's lost hundreds of horses, lots of men. In fact, a lot of the men that were captured ended up at Belle Isle and Libby, the very places they had hoped to rescue. Kilpatrick is in the bad graces of everyone, and finally Meade has an opportunity to get rid of him. But it takes a while. It takes for Grant to arrive and for Sherman to recall or let Grant know, I need a new cavalry commander out here. He says, I know he's a frothy braggart, and an airhead and, fill in all the blanks. He said, that's just the kind of guy I need to lead my cavalry.
Perfect.
And so he's shunted off to Sherman at Atlanta, and he leads the cavalry during the march to the sea.
Isn't it crazy? By like mid '64, the Union armies kind of got it all figured out by that point, command wise. They're like, okay, it took us a couple of years, but here we are.
Fill in the spots where you need them.
Yeah.
So Kilpatrick goes down in history as kind of a flash in the pan. Again, this was the first of the three raids. The second raid, as I mentioned earlier, was the one that resulted in Jeb Stuart's wounding and death. And the third one is little known and not talked about, but when the cavalry at Petersburg go to Trevilian Station, which is purported to be one of the largest cavalry fights in the Western Hemisphere, there was a diversionary raid around Petersburg. It's known as the Wilson-Kautz raid. And worse opportunities for the Union cavalry in that. But that's another story for another time. But that was the Kilpatrick raid, although you could call it the Dahlgren-Kilpatrick raid.
So you mentioned Wade Hampton. Do we know where Jeb Stuart was at this time?
He was further out west. The Confederate cavalry was really out on the western flank watching the Rapidan. But again, in the winter, they weren't really expecting it, but there was reconnaissance going back and forth. Hampton was the closest in, so he was able to bring some troops. Again, only about 6,000 or 600 rather.
So do you think if Kilpatrick had not hesitated and got into Richmond, do you think he could have got out?
I think he probably could have because of the confusion. Had he come in, and then they already knew that there was this southern force, and now this western force come in with Dahlgren, and then Kilpatrick comes barreling into town with a significant body of cavalry. He would have been able to get out because most of the forces would have been to the west, and he was going to go east to escape.
Okay.
The only thing there would have been home guard, and they wouldn't know what he was going to do. They were just getting called out because somebody's here. They wouldn't have been known for sure where to go. But since he hesitated for about 2 hours, as the home guard was ordered up, whatever, they knew where to send him. And even though there was only 600 of them out there against 3,500, Kilpatrick didn't know. Kilpatrick lost his nerve. Kilpatrick lost confidence in Kilpatrick.
But you got to think that these prisoners, like you said, in Libby Prison, had to have been in bad shape. I mean, they're probably skeletons of themselves. I would think they would have held Kilpatrick back.
They would have slowed him down.
They
for
would have
sure.
slowed him down, and it would have been difficult to get out of Richmond with those prisoners.
It would have been difficult. I think they would have had a little bit more time. Again, only 600 cavalry from the Army of Northern Virginia got involved in this, and the rest was home guard, and had that really become into a rear guard action where they were trying to attack to get to the prisoners or vice versa. I think it would have been a little different environment because, these are 3-year cavalrymen in the Army of the Potomac, and they were coming in their own. I mean, at that point, the Northern Cavalry was beginning to show signs of dominance over the Confederate forces. The other thing that occurred was it was no secret to the Confederate authorities that the probable goal of this raid was the release of the prisoners. So they didn't have enough men to guard against it. That was the other thing. They said if they hear that there's Northern forces coming, these guys in the prison, they've got clubs and things they've hidden away on us. Mm-hmm. If they bust out, we've got thousands of Union former prisoners roaming the streets of Richmond while we're trying to fight this force up north and this little thing coming from the west. So what they did, they dug out a big hole in the bottom of Libby Prison and packed it with gunpowder. With orders that if they try and break out, you light that. So
that's one way to do it.
And let it be known that they had done that. So the prisoners knew about it. And that was a little disconcerting because the guards would have gone up with them. We're talking about crater-size explosion from Petersburg. I mean, this thing would have been a big deal. And the guards were just as scared as the prisoners. Now, it did keep the prisoners at bay. They did not try anything. Not sure they would have or were planning to anyway. But the threat or fear of it was real. And so Confederate authorities packed it full of dynamite and said, okay, if you do anything,
the choice is yours.
You're not getting out. You're not getting out, at least not the way you think you're going to get out.
Were there any other repercussions based on that document that was found about assassinating Jefferson Davis and his entire staff? Was there any further repercussions?
There were, any talks that were occurring, even prison exchange, that sort of thing, kind of died for a while because of it. It was just considered such a horrendous idea that it was almost inconceivable to everyone, to the South and really to the North too. There's, well, who would have done that? Unfortunately, it wasn't signed. We'll never know. But he was carrying this order that said, this is what you should do once you're in Richmond. Now, whether he had read it, whether he had known all along, whether who gave him the order, we'll never know because, of course, he was killed in the advance from the West.
That's a great story. I just didn't know much about that. So that's fantastic. Thanks.
I feel like that order probably would be missing the signature too if in the anticipation of it not getting, pulled off the way they hope and they get captured.
The fact that he carried it, that he even had it, makes you wonder what in the heck was he doing,
Right.
You read it and destroy it, right?
But if that raid fails and they get captured and they see, whose name is attached to that, they're probably going to kill them. And so it's probably like, I better just, not put my name on any of that.
Well, he's got, had he been captured and it's in his possession, okay, here comes. Who gave you this? Where'd this come from? No, I can't, That would have been a very interesting kind of opportunity to learn and at the same time, uncharted waters. Mm-hmm. How do you, as a government, come into possession of a man who's charged to kill you all? And you're trying to find out if it was ordered by the government, because this changed this. They can go to Europe now and talk to these countries and said, look what has happened, how this war is changing. We're the civilized one. We certainly aren't trying to kill Lincoln and his cabinet. And here we have proof that, the North has ordered this. So it's possible it could have been used in propaganda as well as an attempt to get recognition from European countries. Whether it would have worked, we'll never know. But it would have been a diplomatic coup to have that.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
That was a really cool story.
Cool stuff.
It was. It was great. Good job.
I guess one other question I had, Jim, was have you done the route of the raid? Have you
Not yet.
driven it? No?
Yeah, I'd like to do it.
Are there any sites along that route that you know still exist or kind of incorporated
Well,
into the story?
In a lot of ways, the same path that Sheridan would have taken. So they
Okay.
would have gone through Beaver Dam Station. They would have gone down through Tunstall Station, some of those other sites that were part of that raid with Sheridan a few months later. In fact, some of the men that were on both, when they're on Sheridan's raid, they go, oh, my God, we were just here 3 months ago, 4 months ago. But the other part of it is the connection with the Bureau of Military Information, which I am very interested in, and the 3rd Indiana Cavalrymen that were part of the BMI. So the gentleman, one of the chief of scouts for the Bureau of Military Information was a 3rd Indiana Cavalryman named Milton Klein. He was
East Wing?
He was a chief, yes, chief, there you go, chief scout. He was with Dahlgren when they made that capture at Gettysburg. He's leading the scouts on this raid. And there's some indication that Kilpatrick is very unhappy with him. I've dug into this, can't find it, but he even said that Klein disobeyed orders. Now, that would be odd for a gentleman who had been in for 3 years and had the role that he had. My guess is he was asked to do something that morally he felt like wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe he was asked to
Kill Jefferson Davis.
or to hang the guide.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman that was hung, unfortunately, he was a freed black man who had helped people
Jesus,
escape.
Jim, I shouldn't have joked about it.
Well, no, he helped. I mean, it's really tragic because he had actually helped men escape from Libya.
Yeah.
He had done other scouting for the North before. I mean, he was a committed.
And he was like, I just don't know another way to go. And they were like, we're going to kill you.
Well, he said, if you don't find a place, I don't know. He said,
I would have made something up.
Yeah.
I was like, I swear it's up right up here, guys. Just a couple more miles.
Well, and the ironic thing was there was about 2 miles away another ford that may or may not have been passable. And he should have known about it. I think he just was oh my God, I don't know anything,
Yeah.
Do we know his name?
Take him back, yes.
Okay.
You're going to ask me his name.
No, I'm not asking the name. I just wanted to know if we knew his name.
I could find it in a little while. It wasn't Thomas Laws, I can tell you that.
That's up here.
I know. I had the name,
No, all
but
good.
it escapes me.
Well, it's just cool that it's a known person because a lot of these guys oftentimes are unknown, whether at any battle. So,
Well, and then unfortunately, the rest of that story is the local populace left the body hang for over a week
oh my goodness.
because it was used basically as here's what the Northerners really think about you guys. So you don't want to go leave the plantation. You don't want to go to freedom because this is what happens to you.
They used, interesting.
So it was left. Yeah, he was left there. And,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Well, Jim, is there any other points you want people to take away from this story? Is there lessons you learned in it, or how people can apply it or learn from it more?
Well, I think the most interesting thing to me is that the kind of the political part of it. Kilpatrick goes over everybody's head. I mean, I can think of the Cavalry Corps commander, Meade, Secretary of War, straight to the president. There were like 4 layers he jumped.
Yeah.
And got a personal interview with the president and got away with it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the better part of it.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do it.
But then for it to work.
Yeah. And not only work, but then the guys that he jumped were forced to support it. And it was kind of one of those, that's sort of but maybe it'll be successful. So they end up doing what they can to try and help him be successful.
So this happened about a week or 2 weeks before Grant took command.
Yes.
So did Grant have any comment or input on this whole thing?
Not on the raid itself, no.
Okay.
Because, again, it went straight to Lincoln and the word came down, that sounds like a pretty good idea. I don't know how he's going to do it. That's your problem. but let's support it.
Well, the thing is, command kind of has to support it, because if you don't, I mean, with the intention of freeing, your fellow soldiers, it's like then you look like the bad guy if you're like, no,
you're
we're not doing this.
committing probably a third of the Army of the Potomac Cavalry Force on this. So yeah, you can't afford for it to go bad out of spite.
Kind of reminds me of a little bit of we didn't talk about it in detail, but the St. Albans raid in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, I think it was their original plan was to go free a bunch of Johnnies up in the north. Not the raid, but I think they had gone up there the first time to try and do that, and then they went up again. But it's not a foreign idea to these guys is to do a big prison break.
Well, and the other part of it is, when you really look at it, it was organized very poorly. You had all these men, you would have maybe 15 or 20 men from 15 or 20 regiments in this organization of 4,000. They didn't know each other, their leadership.
Yeah.
Bad logistics.
Yeah.
Especially for if it does, pan out the way you hope, you get all these prisoners out. You've brought less than enough rations for yourself and your horse, let alone for the people you're about to break out. Then it begs the question, do these prisoners go, oh, do I want to come with you, or do I want to risk staying here because I might have better odds of survival?
Yeah, because I may get caught anyway and come back. That's a good point, because no provision. No one thought, what are we going to do with these guys who are in poor health? Mm-hmm. They're not, and arms. They're trained as soldiers. If you had arms, you at least,
give them a gun and say,
get him a gun, quick. I mean, the organization of that force wouldn't have been any better than what he brought in. They'd have been just men that knew each other from the prison. But, you had officers at Libby. You had a ready-made force there, but you didn't have anything in mind or planned to what to do with them once you got there. It was kind of like, okay, you're free. Take off.
I think this is as I was listening to you tell this story, I was like, I don't know how this isn't studied by by the military and just on what not to do.
What not to do.
When it's the idea is actually great, but just where did everything go wrong and where did you forget to plan? And then, just do the opposite.
Well,
in that situation.
And you also had the fact that these men and again, I can't emphasize how grueling this was on the men and horses.
Yeah.
Because again, they didn't bring enough supplies, as it turned out, both food and forage. And they're in the saddle for virtually the entire time. They got a little bit of nap on the way down and a little bit of nap before Hampton attacked. So they're going for 72 hours, maybe longer.
Well, what's crazy to me is the 2-hour pause.
Yeah.
That's when you decide to pause. Right there at the gates of Richmond. They're like,
But for Kilpatrick to do that when he's known, at least give one good charge, and then if you have to fall back and reform, that's one thing. But because any other battle he's been in '63, he's been that aggressive,
gung ho,
almost too aggressive. That's how he got his nickname. And he gets this. He's in sole command now. This is his baby, and that's the first time too for him. And I think he just choked.
Because if he would have at least sent one charge, he probably would have
gone right through.
Do you think he hesitated because his men were tired?
No.
Or because he saw the home guard and overestimated their numbers?
It was a home guard. And there's a story of an officer out on the skirmish line, right before the skirmish, and there was a road and I can't remember which road, but that goes straight through into Richmond, and a 32-pound parrot fired. And that bowling ball came bounding down the road, and that was kind of like Kilpatrick going, oh.
They know we're here.
Maybe we got to be a little more cautious, and he sends out the skirmishers and what have you. So you could say that somebody firing a 32-pound parrot saved Richmond.
That's a big shell.
That's a big shell.
You could see that going across the sky.
And they say it looked like a bowling ball coming down an alley. I mean, it was bounding down the road coming at them. So it could have been, they said, oh my gosh, look at the size of ordnance they've got in those lines.
What else do they have?
And again, who knows? But yeah.
Wow.
Judson Kilpatrick.
There you go, everybody. Any other questions, Steve?
No, but I want you to know I drank my bourbon totally straight tonight.
Totally straight.
There we go.
Straight drinker.
There we go.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, I did want to thank another supporter of the podcast. That's History Fix. If you want to bring fascinating historical events and civilizations and figures right into your living room, check out History Fix. You can join them for movies, documentaries, short films, and how-tos. Historic eras currently range from the 1st to 21st century. I'm talking to Will about doing the 22nd century, but for some reason they can't do that yet. But their team of curators bring you the most comprehensive and authentic historical content available. All you listeners, Battlefields and Bourbon podcast listeners and fans, can receive an extra 20% off your first year's annual subscription to History Fix. You can sign up at www.historyfix.com. That's www.historyfix.com. Use promo code BATTLEFIELD, BATTLEFIELD. Every subscription includes a 7-day risk-free trial. After signing up, you can download the History Fix app at most places like your smart TV or smartphone and stream your shows from there. You can escape into history today at History Fix. So thank you to History Fix. Gentlemen, anything else?
No, this was a great
Yeah,
story.
thank you, Steve, for coming on and just
sure.
sitting in and asking great questions. That's what a lot of our listeners like, are good questions, as much as they do like a good topic. Jim, thank you for bringing the good topic
You did
here.
threaten him to force him to say something tomorrow, so I'm glad he came
Well,
up
he
with
was
it.
like, I don't
was
need the
off
microphone hooked up, and I was like, it's happening, Steve. So thank you, Jim, very much for bringing this underappreciated, underdiscussed topic to the ears of our listeners. Elijah, anything else?
No.
No?
No.
All right.
No, it was fun.
No, this was fun. Back in the saddle. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.